In a world littered full of large, overpriced SUVs, we wanted to do an economical car shootout. In this case, 3 hybridized sedans. And while you might argue they're not as small as they used to be, the core tenets are still there. Low buy-in price relative to the industry. Low running costs. This is not going to kill you to keep on the road, and that's the major point of these. You're going to want to keep them for a long time. So we chose 3 competitors. The Toyota Prius, the OG, the vehicle that popularized the hybrid formula to a fault because it was the smug vehicle of choice, but luckily that baton has been handed down to modern Teslas. We chose the Prius Prime because the buy-in cost for the low trim level, the SE, is almost identical to that of the Civic Hybrid and a fully loaded Elantra. Second is the Elantra Hybrid. And in this case, because it has the lowest price of all of them at 25 grand, you can get a fully loaded Limited for less than the Prius Prime and the almost base level trim Honda Civic Hybrid. And last but not least, a vehicle that's been on everybody's top 10 list is the Honda Civic Hatchback Hybrid. And it's been revered because of its usability, practicality, and now ultra refinement. So let's get started on the outside. You've kind of had a glimpse at all these cars together. And what you will say immediately, the Prius definitely stands out in a more forward design direction. It looks less generic than it did before. You wouldn't guess that it is an ultra efficient, ultra refined vehicle. And because of the attention to detail on lighting, taillights, and just about every other corner of this car, it definitely stands out in the group. Where the Civic definitely stands out in the fact that it looks more traditional. Despite its liftback, it has a pleasing modern shape with great packaging, good visibility, and all the things you want from a modern vehicle. It also has a bigger footprint, so it's going to do everything a bit better than the other cars. And it also has a sedan option. The Elantra definitely looks the most aged at this point. It is the triangle king. There's little triangles and little shapes all over the place. You can tell this is based on Hyundai's last generation design mentality, and it is definitely the most polarizing of the bunch, least traditional looking. Although it does have a longer shape, it is available only in a sedan. And again, when you park all 3 of these together, it's going to be up to you what stands out the most. But where you're spending your time is the interior. We talk about this every day. You don't look at the outside the whole time. You spend your time living on the interior space. We're going to start with the Elantra Limited at around 29 grand before all the rebates and maybe incentives. You have a very tried and true usable experience. Almost every single control in here is physical. The HVAC zones are separated from the touchscreen. You still have a dimmer like in the Civic and in the Prius, where you have physical controls to deal with the day-to-day without being frustrated. The Elantra also gets a physical shifter, much like the Civic, where the Prius goes to this digi-stick, which is more finicky to use. You have the confidence here, you can just slam this into gear. All your drive mode selectors, your door switches, all of that are basically what they've been for the past 20 years. It's great in that regard. Some of the interior layout is a little bit more weird. I'm just going to put it that way. With this support beam in the middle, it definitely intrudes on passenger space. It tries to create a divide between the driver and passenger, but really what it does is just eats into your practical storage areas. The Elantra also has the worst storage of all 3 cars, where you can barely fit a bottle in the door. You're definitely not fitting anything upright, and things are going to be sliding around in there. It does have the only wireless charger in the group, and storage is pretty good. The armrest is average overall, but the center cup holder space is great for fitting bottles. It makes up for the door space. The seats also go back really far in this car. I mean, if you're a tall driver, you're going to appreciate that, but it does eat into rear passenger space if you're doing that. The Elantra also has the widest opening doors of the bunch in the back, which means getting car seats in and out are going to be the least offensive, and you're going to fight with this car the least. Trunk space, of course, is a mixed bag. When you look at the trunk on this, you can still fit 4 30 International style luggages, but you're sacrificing the rear seats to do so. In terms of everything else, like the infotainment here, it's the best of the bunch. It has the most modern infotainment. It's quick to get around. The safety suite works great. It looks good visibly. The screens are good, and it feels the most cohesive in terms of software experience. They also include other things like their sounds of nature, which have improved greatly, and it is a more quiet experience in here. Again, you're getting the Limited for less than the other two cars, so you're getting heated and cool seats as well. So the tech package, the pricing is very compelling. Onto the Civic hatchback. It has the best usability and visibility of all three cars in this test. It also feels the least claustrophobic. In the Sport trim package, you get these cloth seats. The breathability is excellent. Combined with the seat heaters, they heat up instantly, and in the winter you're going to love this. It has great grippiness. It has that old school feel combined with all the tactility of the controls. It's one of the least offensive cars, something that if you're used to older vehicles, you're going to get in here and you're going to love it. It's got enough modern flair and high quality feel that you're going to feel like you spent your money well. The infotainment is also an interesting choice because it is definitely the most archaic of the three, but you get the physical controls, and the menu structure can be navigated with the tuning knob along with touch. But this is a no bullshit experience. Literally, there is no flair to this. You're going to put it in Bluetooth, or you're going to turn the screen off and never notice it's there. This also has a very good configuration for the rear seats. I mean, you're gonna fit basically any single body type in this car, front and back. It's designed for taller drivers, wider drivers, and you're going to fit a car seat in the back. Combined with the hatchback alternative, you're fitting 3 international style luggages in the back, and then you're gonna have to put down the smaller seat in the back to slide in the 4th. So you can still have a car seat in the back and just load this thing full of cargo, which makes it the most usable vehicle of all three. Onto the Prius Prime. And while you sacrifice some cargo capacity, the hatch is deceivingly big. You do have to put the seats down if you want to fit 4 international style luggages, but the usability is still there. Unlike the Elantra, you're not fighting with the cargo space in the back. Although the rear seats are the most difficult to get in because the roofline in the back is the lowest. If you're a taller person, you're probably going to bang your head. The other problem is the rear seats are definitely impeded in getting in and out because the rear doors open by far. They're so narrow, the opening. It is the worst in terms of hinge design compared to the Civic and the Elantra. You're going to notice it right away. Getting into the front interior space, because this is the lowest trim level of the Prius lineup or Prius Prime lineup, it also does have cloth seats, but it does feel very high quality, much like the Civic. All your knobs, buttons, and switches feel really, really good in here. It feels a price point above in many cases. It feels like a very refined cabin. You can tell the aerodynamic work they did on this car pays dividends in terms of just overall isolation. There's more isolation on the inside. There's no cheapness feeling to it, and everything is still physical controls. The infotainment is a great addition here. You get Toyota connected, and the backup camera, much like the Elantra, is top in the game. The Civic's backup camera is by far the worst quality of the bunch, so if you care about that, this is going to be important to you. The center gauge cluster in the Prius unfortunately gets the BZ4X layout, where it's this kind of monocle up ahead, and it just looks horrible. The dashboard space is enormous. It is a bunch of wasted space to get the exterior packaging they wanted, and what you do is you sacrifice the interior, and the interior feels far more claustrophobic than the other two cars. It feels like a much smaller car in the inside just based on the way that it's packaged, and you definitely notice it. While the door storage is pretty good in this car and the center armrest layout is good, you feel more sports car than you do like just usable sedan. And again, there's these little subtle nuances to each of these cars, but they all do the tried and true things very well. Last but not least is the audio system testing. In last place, surprisingly, is the Bose and the Elantra Hybrid. Despite this being the only one with the upgraded audio system, it has the worst harmonic distortion of the three. When you look at the frequency response, it has the most fluctuation in power levels, over 10 dB swings throughout its frequency range. Compared to the second place car, the Prius Prime with a bass audio system, it is far more controlled. While it does have some bass elevation and a little bit more distortion level than the Civic, its frequency response is far more linear. And while there is some power deviation in terms of from low to high, it's definitely more pleasing to listen to as well compared to the Elantra. In first place is the Civic Hybrid, and this has the bass audio system as well, and we tested both the Bose and the bass system, and they are very close, surprisingly. It has the best control in the frequency response and the less deviation in power. although you do trade off bass response in the lower trim level Civic. You lose that power from the subwoofer on the Bose system, and you can definitely tell you definitely tell the loss of bass in that lower trim level Civic. However, it is still the best to listen to. It is the least grating and the most pleasingly neutral. But that's it for the interior segment. Let's head in the shop. I'm going to give you a crash course on the 3 hybrid systems before we take this for a drive. In the shop with 3 hybrids, I'm going to give you a crash course. Now, if you're looking for more technical detail, we have a dedicated video for all of these cars, so check that out. But we're going to start with the Elantra Hybrid. This is the most conventional of the cars in the test because it is the only one with a transmission that shifts gears. It has an Eco dual clutch 6-speed, and that is tuned for fuel efficiency versus outright performance. It feels more like a torque converted automatic. What that means is if you're coming from a conventional car to the hybrid world, you're not going to know the difference. It doesn't have that rubber bandy feel of a CVT or eCVT where it holds revs at the maximum RPM. Most people are never going to know this is a hybrid, but it does have the benefits of hybridization still. When you're driving around in EV mode where the gasoline engine's off, it still will shift gears because of the transmission controls that as well. When you come to a stop, all of these cars have electric AC compressors. So when you're at a light and the engine's off, you still have AC. It's running in the background, unlike gasoline cars that have start-stop. So that's another pro. All 3 of these cars have lithium-ion packs as well. There's no nickel metal hydride here, even in the Prius. Now, when we're talking about the body structure of the Elantra, it's strut front, multi-link rear, and that's something that some of the lower trim levels don't get with the Elantra. They put the multi-link here because of the extra weight and the body rigidity of the car. So it gives you better driving dynamics, and if you're in the back seat or you have backseat passengers, it's less bouncy. It feels more substantial. So that's a huge pro of the hybrid version of this car, despite its really low entry point. At about $26,000, it starts at the lowest of the group and maxes out around $29,000, and there's always incentives on this car. So this might be the car you want to get if you're cost conscious. Now, the negative part about that is it's got the smallest engine of the bunch, lowest displacement at 1.6 liters. It is designed around efficiency first. It does not make a lot of power. It makes only about 130 horsepower, which you definitely feel it. Everything else in terms of consumables, oil changes are going to be cheap. There's nothing weird about this car. It's all steel, so your running costs should be pretty low. Tires across this entire test, if you want to replace all of them, they're going to be between $160 and $200, about $180 for a Bridgestone tire, which isn't too bad considering some of the other cars we test are upwards of $300 per tire now. Now we're going to get into the next competitor, that's the Honda Civic Hybrid. This is probably the most unique in terms of electric drivetrain or hybrid electric drivetrain, and that's because the way that it's designed is to run almost exclusively through direct drive through its electric motor. It is always trying to propel you with electric drive. The gasoline engine has been designed around maximum efficiency. They made an engine really that is there to deliver the ultimate in efficiency, and it backgrounds itself almost always to just charge the electric battery pack. It's not there to propel you except over around 45 miles an hour just because of gearing. So it has a multi-plate clutch to recouple the engine to the electric drivetrain when needed. But other than that, really, you're in EV mode and it feels the most EV. Now they have programmed some synthetic shift patterns in there. When your foot to the floor, it feels more like a dual clutch. It will bang off what feels like shifts to make it feel more conventional. That's a pro or con depending on who you are. This is also a front-wheel drive only platform like the Elantra, no all-wheel drive option. This is strut front, multi-link rear, has great refinement, and for $25,000 they've updated the body structure to improve crash testing, side sill design, they've updated the shock mounts, and overall global stiffness is up, which means it is a much more direct, more substantial feeling car. However, on the lower trims, it definitely does not have the sound absorption material that even the Elantra has and the Prius has. So, there's trade-offs here of what they're trying to do. Last car on the list is the Prius Prime. And we included the Prime here because the price point is not all that different from the other cars. It's only about $3,000 more than the regular Prius Hybrid. And for $32,000, the SE trim level gives you the best fuel efficiency of all the Prius Primes. It also gives you the ability to plug it in and get 44 miles of dedicated EV range. But it also gives you the ability to just not use that and use it as a regular hybrid and get over 50 miles per gallon. The big selling point of the Prius Prime and the regular Prius
it's the only one that has all-wheel drive as an option. They give you an electric motor in the back that is powered by the lithium-ion pack. The other benefit of the Prius Prime is it has more power because of the bigger electric motor. It's 220 horsepower and you notice it instantly, namely on the highway. When you put your foot to the floor, as you keep going, it feels like it's making more and more power, where the Civic and the Elantra, like, the faster you go. So if you want the best power to weight, of course, and the most aerodynamic form factor, the Prius does a great job. You can tell they spent a lot of money on this car. It is one of our favorite cars when it came out in terms of a compact, and it does not disappoint. The body structure has been updated here. It feels far more substantial. The NVH is lower in the Prius. Again, it helps with aerodynamics. There's less wind noise in this car than the Civic. Although the Civic does try to cheat with active noise cancellation, the Prius doesn't need as much of that. The Prius is also strut front, multi-link rear, latest TNGA-C architecture, which shared a bunch of tons of cars. The only negative here is the Prius Prime. They only make about 15,000 of them a year. So if you're looking for that plug-in option and you can't find it that easily, you're gonna have to go to the regular Prius, which loses horsepower, and I feel like it's not as compelling as the other hybrid options in this test. But we're gonna take these for a drive and kind of explain the nuances of all of them.
I've taken your only joy, Mark, driving Honda products, Civic Hybrid Sport.
Don't do this to me. Oh, God. Do you know how to launch a hybrid? The brand on my back, the cattle brand of the Honda logo is burning from all that torque, Jack. Whoa!
Let's feel some dynamic capability of this front-wheel drive car.
Whoa! Whoa!
Oh, man, I feel that balance. I feel that Formula One technology. They moved from Red Bull to Aston.
You think you're Max Verstappen?
I do.
Yeah, this is the car he would drive every day.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, as a former Honda-sponsored driver, or soon-to-be former Honda-sponsored driver, he's clearly a Civic man. When I look at that his salary, I'm like, man, that's a guy who drives a Civic Hybrid.
Look, Jack, I don't like your negativity. Let's talk about why this car's the best.
Look.
And you admit, all right?
Yes.
We're not even through all the cars yet, and you know it's the best.
If we were going to release our top cars of 2024, which we probably still will, this would win my compact car of the year. Not because it's the most exciting to drive, but this is by far the most proficient at being a perfect appliance.
Oh, you can't even just acknowledge that it's a good car. You got to call it an appliance. Let me paint the Porsche badge on here.
It's incredible.
Is it the best car ever?
I'd rather have this in a GT3 now, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, we're not the only ones that say this is good. So let's explain why it is good. What is it doing that makes it so special?
It does.
Aside from price.
All right. It does the everyday car things to the point where you don't think about anything. You don't have to make excuses for it, and it never, most importantly, gets on your nerves. So on the drivetrain side of things, while this may or may not be the most efficient drivetrain out of the bunch, technically the Prius gets slightly better fuel economy. This is the most refined. You never hear the rattly four-popper. The electric motor comes in and out. When you're in traffic, it relies on the electric motor as well. And to your point that you made to me, you're just sitting parked, it doesn't even kick on the engine. The electric motors do all that they need to run the AC. It's ultra refined. It rides particularly well. It's on the noisier side. This is also a sport, not a touring that we're in. But there's a decent amount of tire noise, but it's not necessarily super offensive though. If you're on really, really noisy roads, like you're in Washington State or something, or some of the bad roads in Illinois.
Yeah, you get on concrete surfaces, on highway surfaces.
It might get on your nerves, but
so we're talking about the $30,000 trim level, and this is the base, right? Like, this is the noisiest one. It's got the least amount of sound deadening, and I think it definitely hurts it. I mean, all the cars have gotten more refined, and when you get out of, the Toyota, the Hyundais, like, they all are more and more quiet. This has been a big push in the industry, and this generation Civic is quieter than the last, but you definitely notice driving it right away. Not so much just putting around, but when you get at the higher speeds, it is like there is a ton of airborne noise in here.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you're noise adverse, it's definitely going to be a deal breaker for you. But that's really one of the few things that it does wrong.
Compared to the Prius, which you can optionally get with all-wheel drive, you are going to notice it in wet weather, particularly if you live in a twisty area with oscillating roads, mountains, or you live in an area with snow. I think that is a huge advantage the Prius has over this. And as a con to it as well, this does not have a lot of personality. I think it has more personality than the Elantra, unless you love triangles. But I think the Prius has a cool factor that this does not have. I think it is a little bit more connected to drive on a back road than this is. We're not saying it's a sports car, but I think it's a little more entertaining to drive than even the Civic is. May not be as competent, though.
I guess we're going to have that argument when we drive the Prius next.
Oh, and that's a real Takumi car. This is Canadian.
Yeah, Canadian. Well, all those people. Horrible. Prime time, Jack.
You're such a loser. While we are in a Prime, it is important that we're going to be talking about both the regular Prius and this, as we've spent a lot of time in both vehicles. And
God, dude, the stability control actually kicked on that one when it got air. So
let's talk about both the regular Prius and this, because just because the way press fleets work, they gave us a Prime, though we asked for a regular all-wheel drive Prius, but we've driven both. We spent a lot of time in both cars. We have lots of videos. How does this compare to the Civic, which we called amazing a couple minutes ago?
What's interesting about all three is they're in a similar price point. I think the Prime offers something for a similar price point in technology's sake, because you have the plug-in capability, although like right now we're just driving in pure hybrid mode because we've drained the battery down. So it functions in a different way. I think feeling-wise overall, it's far more claustrophobic than the Civic. You don't have the visibility, and this is the body shape. It's the negative part of the dashboard feeling enormous. You just feel tight inside this car. I will say that feels a little bit more substantial. It feels a little bit less prone to noise and vibration. Some of it's its aerodynamic shape. There is wind noise, don't get me wrong. This isn't the most quiet car on the planet.
But compared to the Civic, it is quiet.
It definitely...
quieter.
Yes. It feels like a lot less gets in through the body structure, through the tires, and through the glass into the driving experience. But, you trade off some of that in the drivetrain noise. Even when you're putting this around, you tend to hear the gasoline engine a lot more. It needs it, right? That's how it's making its power. It's not completely powered by its electric motors. So you're definitely getting that traditional Toyota rattly ass four-cylinder
And that's
sound.
the same both in the Prime and the regular Prius.
Yes, same thing.
And the Prime is actually more powerful than the all-wheel drive Prius. At least it's quicker to 60. The con, of course, is just like the Prius we're driving, is it's front-wheel drive only.
Yep, so all three vehicles that we're driving are all front-wheel drive, so they're going to have the same disadvantages that we talked about in the Civic. In inclement weather, it wants to rip the front tires off the ground quite a bit when you're driving it. But the one thing this car does great, even for being front-wheel drive, is it feels very small and nimble. There's not a point where you're fighting the car. It changes direction very easily. I will say that the steering is far lighter than the Civic in almost every single way. It's just an easier car to maneuver, but dynamically this is worse. It's softer than the Civic, and not in a good way sometimes. There's not a point in time where you're starting to lose grip or anything where the stability and traction control aren't always coming in. This is always using its brake system and always using electronics to dial back power to keep this in check, where the Civic just naturally does what it does without interference.
Conversely, though, if you did get an all-wheel drive variant in the regular Prius, a lot of the corner exit issues that this car has, particularly as you get into the manure-filled farm roads that we're driving on, that won't be as big of a problem.
Sure.
One of the things...
hey, who's calling
You're a
me?
busy
Ignore
businessman,
that
Mark.
call.
One of the things I will say about this car is because it's... An idiot.
Hey, enough with the manure.
One of the things I will say is because this car almost feels like you're on the top of a medicine ball.
Yes.
Whereas the Civic, you don't feel like you're sitting on top of it, you're sitting in it. The car, geese. The Civic, because you feel like you're sitting in it, I feel like there's less drama. Because you're on top of the medicine ball, I do think limit handling in the Prius is more entertaining, not because it's good, just because it's, this big roly-poly car.
Yeah. I think, honestly, for
I think
a car
this
like
with a huge rear sway bar would be hilarious.
Yeah, no, it would definitely want to turn. But, I mean, really, what you're buying these cars for is, you're looking for a couple things. Is the efficiency part is obviously super important.
It is the most efficient out of all three.
It is definitely the most efficient.
Regardless of trim level.
With as little effort as possible, it's as efficient as you can get. It's also as compliant and as soft as you're going to get of the three. It definitely, if you care about kind of more of that softer, more plush ride, more compression, there's a lot more float and give over bad pavement.
There's basically no harshness in the suspension whatsoever.
They did a really good job with this.
Without it feeling like a complete boat.
Yes.
You don't feel like, little boat, big C's problem. Well, a lot of SUVs, this actually feels just well controlled as it goes through everything.
I don't think, to be truthful, the Civic, I think all the inputs are better. I think it's a much better car to drive if you like to drive, and the visibility part helps greatly in it. You're not having to look around, and you don't have to lean on the safety systems as much on the Civic as you do this. And things like brakes on this car, the brake-by-wire setup on this car is the pedal's super soft. The inputs are very, very soft on this car compared to the Civics. If you want a more relaxed drive, you're going to like this better. But if you feel like you're in more control of the car, you're going to appreciate the Civic because it has a more old-school feel.
I do think this feels less generic than the Civic, though.
It does. It has an appearance to it. I noticed driving behind you today. Driving behind this, it does have a road presence to it.
Is it because I'm understeering through the car?
Yeah, you're understeering. Yeah, this car definitely does not have the greatest limit handling that
The Prime specifically.
The Prime, yeah. But I mean, honestly, it does look cool on the outside. And if you're willing to sacrifice some of the interior for the way that it looks unique, regardless of the Prius badge, I think it does score.
Yeah, even the dash layout, while is not as.
It's an enormous dash because of the way that the front.
It says Prius here under my screen, Mark. All right, let's drive a Hyundai.
Sounds good.
Hyundai Elantra Hybrid, Mark. You ready? You got a consultant in the back seat, Johnny Subprime. Yeah. Physical gears, Mark. It's that refinement that I crave.
How many gears you got?
I got 6 physical gears. Just hit 60.
Got something in my mouth. Something must have flown in from the outside with that speed.
All right, let's feel. Brake. Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, I'm gonna puke. This car's too much juice.
All right, so drivetrain refinement. This sits happily between the Toyota Prius variants and the Civic. While you have a rattly 4-cylinder, at least the shifts are real, and this, I think, feels the most normal as far as a driving experience. It doesn't feel like a hybrid. It just feels like a regular 4-cylinder
with a torque converted auto.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why you would buy this, is if you don't want the different experience of the Prius and you don't want the unique experience of the Honda, this just feels like a normal car. You would never know, nobody would ever know that it's a hybrid driving it.
And it's cheap.
Yep.
This is, any way you cut it, $3,000 to $4,000 less than its equivalent trim from its competitors. And I think that is a very, very compelling reason to buy a car like this.
And you're going to get financing based on this gentleman back here for 24% interest for 144 months. No one is turned away, Jack.
The handling balance of this car, so unlike some of the cheaper Elantras, because you got a multi-link in the back, it's pretty competent. I mean, I don't think it's as boaty as the Prius is, but it's nowhere as composed as the Civic.
I think you said the best thing right when we started this, is it splits the difference between both the cars. It's like somewhere in the middle of what the other two cars are doing in terms of ride. And dynamics overall.
I do think, before we get into the final thoughts then, Mark, that's really all we need to talk about. I think the inputs are a little better than the Prius, not quite as good as the Civic. I'm a winner. Oh, yeah.
Ballsy. Oh, man, now there's a Nissan stopped. It's a RAV4. What is it? I can't tell.
It's a RAV4, sir. See, when this car's been tuned to Namyang, Mark.
The Namyang standards?
Yes.
I feel like we're in Korea right now. Where is this even made?
Christ Laboratory, Mark. Yeah.
Oh, my sausage is coming up. Oh! Oh! Now you're gonna get cock blocked by another Kia. So immediately you notice something, that the limits of this are higher than the Prius. Like you can get away with a lot more. There's more driver confidence in this car than there is in the Toyota. This is less of a boat.
The stability control comes in less hard.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's because it makes no power as well.
Right. That's true. I think dynamically, the Civic still is the best of the bunch while still having a decent ride, where this still has decent dynamics, but the ride is far more choppy.
It feels like the cheapest car of the bunch.
It definitely feels like the cheapest, but I will say it's probably, if you were really going to objectively put measurement tools all over this, it's slightly quieter than the Civic. Mm-hmm. But we're also in the upper trim level, which might make a difference.
It's telling me to consider taking a break.
You should take a break. It knows you're all over the place. So, Jack, I think... Oh, she's a mover.
All right, if you didn't drive this thing like a total asshole, I think this is the middle ground between all the cars in basic refinement, primarily because the drivetrain. Ride quality, it's the worst, and the inputs, it's better than the Prius, but worse than the Civic.
And in terms of efficiency, you look at our drive loops, the Prius is by far the most efficient.
Followed by the Honda,
and then this. And I think it falls in line with kind of the price point, to be fair. Your expectations... God, why is this thing holding gears?
Because I was in sport mode, Mark, for all my sporty driving.
This thing definitely is representative of the price point that it's at, and if you don't need some of the stuff that the other two cars do, and we have this conversation about Hyundai and the Elantra in general, it's giving you a lot for your money. And I think that's the big takeaway. The tech is great. Mostly the tech is great. The safety suite works better than the Honda.
There's probably even the Toyota, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, so again, it's priorities and price with this shootout. But I think it's time to sum this up, Jack.
All right, Mark. Let's have you wrap this all up in our final thoughts, sir.
You can count on that. The conclusion, you might wonder who won, and this was very, very hard to decide this. In fact, I woke up and I had a vision. I dropped to my knees and I knew what I had to choose. I made the executive decision. The Civic Hybrid won this test by a very narrow margin, and that is for a few reasons. It is the most balanced car of the bunch in terms of usability, practicality, functionality. Resale value is incredibly high. This is a car you're going to buy and not lose your ass on, which is super important in this segment. And again, it has the best driving character of all of them in terms of inputs: steering, brake pedal feel, solidness in the chassis. It also has the best audio system of the bunch, and you're going to fight this car the least out of all of them for every single task that you need. May not be the most exciting looking car particularly, but they do offer it in a sedan and hatchback form factor. So the next car, which is second place by maybe 1 or 2 percentage points difference from the Civic, is the Prius Prime or the Prius Hybrid. And where this took a big hit is in its overall packaging, because they spent so much money on the aerodynamic shape and trying to make it look so much more special, it sacrifices the usability of the interior. It feels far more claustrophobic. Getting in and out of the rear seats, namely with a child seat, is very difficult compared to the Civic and the Elantra. And despite its hatch shape, you can't fit as much in the hatch as you could the Civic Hybrid hatchback. And that was one of the big things for us. However, it does have the refinement.
It definitely has the refinement here. It has less airborne noise or wind noise. It pays dividends in that body structure, all that aerodynamics that they put into it. It feels like it just glides along on the highway much easier. The fact that you can plug this car in and use it as an EV is a huge selling point. And this is where we really struggled with it. You know, that $2,000 versus the Civic, I mean, that's a huge selling part. And the fact that you can get this as all-wheel drive, this might really edge it out in certain places where you get inclement weather all the time. You might choose the Prius over it. But we felt the overall interior packaging as that do-everything car is where this really struggled. Now, the Elantra came in third place, and it's just more of a byproduct of its price point. You know, it's competing at a way lower price, and even the Limited, to be fair, is cheaper than both these cars in the test. The Limited you can get with incentives for probably like $28,000. So if you want to save money, this would be the car for you. The interior feels dated, unfortunately. I think it's just it feels more cheaply made. It feels very generic. The plastics, the way everything's clicky, just feels like it's cost cut more. That's where they're saving the money. Now, in terms of driving, I would say it's in second place compared to the Civic, despite it doesn't have the raw power, but it's more tossable. It feels more engaging to drive than the Prius, where the Prius was on the softer side. The Elantra was kind of split the difference. And the regular transmission might be a really good thing for normal people that are coming from a regular car. You might like this a lot. But personally, given the depreciation where the Civic holds its value the best, the Elantra is going to lose the most amount of value. So you're either going to have to get this with heavy discounts or just straight up buy it on the used market and take your risks there. And that's one of the factors on all of this. You know, you can't just look at the car as a whole as like a big piece of machinery. You have to look at like how much it's going to cost you. And that's where the Civic really comes out on top. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.